Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Wellness and Big Law Part 3. You all are listening to the Mental Breakdown podcast with yours truly, Shay, where it is easy to listen, thus easy to function. Today, we have a very special guest by the name of Mariette Clark Davis. I will add her to the stream so that she can introduce herself and her firm and just what you're doing when it comes to law and wellness.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Shay, for having me here. I think it's really important to just have podcasts and platforms like this. As Shay said, my name is Mariette Clardy Davis. I am a mixed bag, but primarily I work as an attorney. I am founder of ML Clardy Law, and ML Clardy Law was really a genesis of a law firm due to my passion for mental health. So I do everything from mental health, psychiatric treatment representation to employment law, ADA accommodations. I also am passionate about the Web3 blockchain community. And so I partner with DAOs and other organizations in the Web3 space to provide business and advisory legal services. So, specifically as it relates to mental health, I not only practice, but I am also an advocate and I have bipolar depression. So I'm also someone with lived experience.
Yes. Wow. 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 And that I would prefer for a professional to have experience, especially when it comes to mental health, than to just speak from distant experience. So that is especially something that I know your clients value. Um,
Yes.
Certainly. This first question that we have here to kind of jump into the topic we have at hand, wellness and big law, is what do you personally do for your own health and wellness, Miss Davis?
Great question. So I made sure I took notes so that I don't go off on tangents. But I do a number of things for wellness and mental health. The first thing, because of my diagnosis, I continue to do therapy. I specifically do dialectical behavioral therapy, which is a specific type of therapy within the mental health kind of world. Another thing that I do is meditation, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But when I first started it, I was terrible at it. I quit a few times because I didn't think it was for me, but I am slowly building my meditation practice. I'm also big with movement. So, getting out walking, lifting, yoga, dancing, exercise. I love learning, self development. That is something that is also important to me. And let's see if I left anything out. Oh, naps. I love naps. If
Oh,
you are like, who's a weekend napper? She's here. And then I think finally, I would just end with creative endeavors. I think I started, I'm going to say 4 or 5. I was that little girl that was trying to learn choreography to
oh,
MTV and different videos.
yes.
I'm really big in the performance art space, both viewing and participating, dancing, etc. But I love all kinds of arts, visual and performance.
I love that. Yes, that is definitely an outlet. I interviewed a gentleman by the name of, um, well, I, this is a series, right, for Wellness and Big Law. And I could just remember the two names that I interviewed probably 2 days before was Will Meyerhofer. You can see him on my Instagram, and Mike Kasdan. And interestingly, you would have thought that their outlets were to have been like maybe something law related, like reviewing precedent cases or something that be, law oriented, but it's usually in the arts, like, participating in what is it, spoken word nights and performing arts. So it's really interesting that a lot of lawyers have those types of outlets that stray completely from law. Our third question here, I believe second, is along the lines of health and wellness. What inspires you?
What inspired me? Um, I would say self development. Specifically, I am a big advocate of becoming the best version of yourself. And I recently heard this from someone, but specifically, what is the most elite version of you? And so the inspiration for continuous journey to kind of the best version of me and alignment, not just in my professional life, but also in my wellness and mental health, is a big inspiration. And I also, not just for myself, but it's something that I'm a big advocate for other individuals as well.
Nice. Very nice. Very nice. And pardon me if I. And so, okay, so self development, yes, agreed. Now, what would you say it is about law schools and then just the legal profession in general that leads quite a number of individuals to enter a law career and then develop distress or anxiety or depression?
So I would say that the biggest thing is the type of individual that generally would be attracted to the field of law. And as you said, you were surprised that there were so many of us that were creatives, but I will say that there are certain personality traits of, I wouldn't even say a good lawyer, but people who tend to gravitate in that direction. So someone who's generally driven, analytical, curious, let's see, great speaker, maybe not a great speaker, but I would say persuasive, whether in the written or spoken word. Someone who is currently a big seeker. I would say those are many of the qualities. And in those qualities, which I think are great strengths, fantastic skill sets, oftentimes when you are put in an environment of law school and the types of things that you have to do to kind of get ready for the profession or the practice of law, it may exasperate certain things that may have already existed. So I dealt with anxiety and depression. I was diagnosed with bipolar depression at 21. So I had already had those underlying symptoms well before I went to law school later in my career. But many colleagues, often I hear, especially when I'm speaking with them, I often hear that they dealt with anxiety or depression on some format even prior to law school. But definitely when people either go to law school or enter the profession, there is a big push on being the best version of yourself. But unlike what I'm like advocating on, which is being the best version of yourself energetically through alignment in ways that don't burn you out, the legal profession has at many times challenges with setting very high expectations of individuals to perform and produce results for their clients, because let's face it, many attorneys are the bridge between someone's rights being taken away, someone's freedom being taken away, someone's money being at jeopardy, someone's deal falling through. So they are generally advocates for the doorway of a dramatic change in either an individual or a business's life. And so that kind of pressure, not just from the client, but I think the industry and the profession itself often exasperates that.
Right. And a little sidebar question would be, is it a little harder for women when we're working for or working different cases? Because you mentioned one common trait that's shared between lawyer types, or the common trait of a lawyer type is to be analytical. And women naturally are like emotional. And a text that I recently read from my freshman composition class is just that you have in law that women, we look at less of the facts and more of context. And then you have men, which is typically vice versa. So does that make it a little harder for women in law, or just what are your personal experiences?
I think personally, I never really considered myself very analytical, but I was always curious. I
Right.
was always asking questions. I was always, just trying to dig deeper. I was always questioning. And so, even though I didn't personally consider myself analytical, I think that that really is, or it could be a foundational aspects of an analytical thinker. And so even though I didn't particularly feel that way, I think that there are parallels between the two. As it relates to emotional context, some people are stronger in kind of the emotional cues than others. Do I
Yeah.
think women are? I think yes. However, in law school, one of the things that they teach you is how to be more of an analytical thinker. But I think having that emotional context, if you use it and leverage it in a way that helps to either serve your case or serve your clients or just serve the goal,
Mhm.
it could become an asset. And so I think that the key and the challenge is how to take your skill sets that you have or that you're learning or your superpowers and create an environment where they become assets
Yeah.
versus liabilities.
Yes. Great wording. Yes, that's exactly. And yeah, that balance between empathy as well as analytical reasoning is definitely, I feel, a value balance. So I appreciate that. I know that wasn't on the list, but that just came to my head. Our next question would be for the young law professionals that are tuning in. Most of our listeners are high school students. We have a few listeners that are middle school students, but this is specifically for the high school students that have that focus in on the law profession. So, with that, what are some of the warning signs that they should look out for that might reveal they're having difficulties?
So that's a really hard question. And I didn't really have a solid answer for it because it really is based on the facts and circumstances. So I will use a lawyerly answer and say it depends on the person. But the reason why it depends, so is, in my opinion, kind of nuanced. So, in my personal experience, when I dealt with challenges in law school, I was not I knew that it was happening. I had been a veteran, in my opinion, to the therapy game. I told you I was diagnosed with bipolar depression at 21, and I didn't enter law school directly after my master's. I waited a couple of years. So I entered law school, I believe, like in my late 20s, early 30s. So I kind of had an idea of my symptoms. However, I was not self aware enough to be able to get through many of the obstacles. So I would say some of the warning signs could be your lack of awareness. Other warning signs could be you feeling overwhelmed, anxious. Uh, I was a person who was a big overthinker. I
Okay.
would think a lot in the future about things that might happen, in the past, about things that already happened, and in the present. And so that kind of, I would say, trifecta type thinking often caused and built layers of anxiety. So that's another warning sign. And it's this is a good question because I had to think about it. When I was struggling, um, I didn't really realize it until midterms because I was still doing the work. And I think that oftentimes people think, okay, there's going to be this huge event. And generally it's not. Sometimes I wouldn't bathe for weeks or I would just kind of stumble into class, but I still did the work. I put in the time, I did the work, I turned in the assignments. Law school is different than high school or middle school where you have assignments every week. So it's easier to kind of track, okay, I missed these 10 assignments. So that's kind of a warning sign. In many law schools, you don't get graded until it's your midterm or your finals. So what that means is you're not having those same type of gauges. However, I felt that I was still doing okay. I showed up to my classes, I showed up to work, because I also worked full time and went to school part time.
Mm.
So it really depends on the person. But I would really say the biggest thing, what hit me personally when I knew, okay, but by then it was too late. I was in one of my classes, my con law class, and my cats are all over the place, so excuse them.
So,
My con law class, and the words were floating off the page. literally. And I would turn the page and I would forget. And I would go back and I would read it, and they were just floating. And then I would turn the page and I would forget 80% of it. So cognitively, I had a hard time retaining information, except the key was it was time for midterms. And I was like, I can't, this is, I can't, this is it. I can't do this. And I realized at that point that it probably wasn't going to work out the way I thought it was, because I'm a pusher. And I'm always like, if you push hard enough, you can make it. But
Yeah.
that was a big lesson where I realized that sometimes, no matter how you push or how much you push, it may not always work out. And so I had to pivot.
Hmm.
I
And it
hope that answered your question.
really did. It did. It did. It did. And it just another sidebar would be, do you communicate? Who do students? Who do you communicate your struggles to? So, and that would be a two-part question. Prior to um, even getting to that point, like as you start feeling overwhelmed or whatever those early warning signs are, who do you communicate that to? Your professors, just so that um, it still remains confidential, but just so that the people that are important in your life know what's going on.
So, who did I communicate it to? Very few. I believe I may have communicated it to my colleagues, but when I dropped out of law school, I eventually came back. But when I dropped out, and everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, you're doing so well," I communicated to all my colleagues, like, "I'm done. I can't do this. I have to take care of me." Who should you communicate to? I mean, if you have colleagues that you feel like you can trust, because one of the great things I think about law school is that you do begin to build bonds that in many cases will last you decades. So if you have colleagues like that, or friends or family, to speak with them. Also, many schools have a wellness or a place that you can go to get resources. The Georgia bar, and don't quote me on this, I'm not entirely sure, but I believe they also have programs. I know they definitely do for lawyers, but programs for law school students as well. So the bar can be of assistance, but also the school has programs in place. So if you are thinking that you need to speak with someone, oftentimes there are resources to do that.
Okay, we'll do. And I'll try and find like a link to that so they can do their own research.
Yes.
And
but
fact.
but I would say start with your school, because generally the schools have started to spotlight wellness, and they will have a section on their website, whether it's kind of the student
Oh,
portal or whatever, that relates to what resources are available. So I would say to start there, with the resources that your school provides, and then move out.
got you. Okay. And then a lot of these law schools, which I learned, which is pretty nerve wracking, is that and expected is that they're pass or fail, right? A lot of the questions are just pass or fail. So with that, just like standardized test scores, I'm trying to parallel like the law school and high school just so it's understandable. But just like the standardized test scores that or standardized tests that us students have to take, like SAT and ACT, it's easy to attach our self-worth to those scores. So how did you manage that with um, law school?
Well, I would say I was always driven anyway,
Right.
but I did understand, I think intuitively, although it had to develop throughout the years, that there are many different paths in the pursuit of law where you can be successful. And you don't have to have the best grades if you are strategic with the direction that you need to go. Now, there may be some roads or avenues or goals where you're going to need those grades. So if you know that's the end result, you're going to need those grades. Then what I would suggest is, how can I get those grades? What are the strategies? Oftentimes, a lot of individuals don't get the help that they need, or they wait, and often to their detriment. So if you feel like you need extra tutoring, I literally went to my professors when we were doing like prior to midterms, and I would have a lot of self-study tools like what are those books called, examples and explanations, where
Mhm.
they give you sample questions for you to write, and then they give you sample answers and they break down why. I would literally take those to my professors during their office hours. And that's another thing. A lot of people in law school sometimes feel like, oh, I made it, I don't need to do the whole office hours thing. Yes, you do. If that's the goal and you need to get those grades. But I was the type of person like, I I don't hate to say this. Listen, you're getting paid to teach me. So if I have to come to every single one of your office hours to be able to get it, I will. If you have to look at 50,000 examples that are a hot mess until I get it together come midterm, you will. Like that's what's going to happen because I'm not going to waste my money to do this. So I always kind of had that. And again, a lot of it was I was working full time. I was going to school in the evening. So I really didn't have time to play around. Like I wasn't there for that. I had a very specific, like, I need to get in here and get out and do as well as I can.
I like that. That that mindset is definitely what I'm taking on. Um, and that'll be the trailer, I think. The little 30-second bit. And I would say, I think you really answered the last question, but um, all I would ask is, or what I simply ask from all of my honorable guests, is for a drop for the podcast, which is simply where you introduce yourself and then you say you're listening to the Mental Breakdown podcast.
Okay. So, hello, my name is Mariette Clardy Davis, and you are listening to the Mental Breakdown podcast.
Yes. Thank you. And that
How was that? I
was
think you did. Oh, there was one more question. If you
the
still want to do that, what would you say you learned or gained from opening up about your experiences?
okay.
Did you still want to do that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So okay. So what would you say you learned or gained from opening up about your experiences?
So I would say the big thing is that I wasn't alone, that my experience, my journey, although it was unique to me, that there were other voices in the legal community and legal professionals who had similar experiences. Initially, in my journey with law school, I spoke to my colleagues about it, especially when I left law school and then returned. But I really didn't talk about what happened specifically. And so when I started speaking more about my personal journey with bipolar depression as an attorney, as a law school student, as a woman of color, I was really, I would say, blessed to have people come up to me and say how much I related and how much it resonated with them, and also for them to share their stories and their experiences with me. So, the big takeaway really is that your voice matters, and that your voice matters. It is important, and to use it in a way that helps you to be the best version of yourself. And so it took me years to learn that. And if I could impart any wisdom, it would be that.
That is phenomenal. And you may most likely have uh, done that knowledgeably, but the fact that you tied in what you learned to what was it? I think what inspired you, just like your answer about self development. So I admire that. Just how you connected the dots. I admire that.
Yay.
And so yes, I'm grateful that you spared some time, that we were able to finally reconnect
Of
and
course.
the dates and times and everything.
And
But
I'm respectful of your time. I know, like, I'm the type, I'm like, let's get in, let's get out.
understood. Yes,
Yes. I know some people sometimes are challenged with that,
right.
but
Like
I'm
what?
like, I want to get her in and out.
Understood. And I'll definitely have the trailer to you at least by Tuesday, by before,
Okay.
and then I'll try to edit the full interview.
Okay. Do you need anything else from me.
Not at all. Just for you to have a good Sunday and a productive week.
Yay! That's all I got.
All right. Thank you so much and have a beautiful Sunday.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.